Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome to the latest episode of the podcast, number 23, I think the episode number is. And yes, here you go, this is me doing the podcast live with Facecam for the first time. So hello to everyone who is watching. Hopefully you're doing well on this Saturday. But today, what we're going to be doing is looking at all of the drivers that are either moving to new teams or drivers that are making their debuts for 2019, and there are a lot of them. So what we're going to be doing today is looking at all of them and giving our thoughts on how they're going to do in 2019 and our thoughts on them as a driver going into the season. And I will today, thankfully, be joined by Nib. But yeah, there you go. That's what we're going to be talking about today, and I'll just get Nib in now. So Nib, hello, are you there?
I am indeed, and I must start off by apologising for not showing up last week. That was very poor of me.
Oh, don't worry about it. It was a bit of a slow news week last week, so don't worry about it. But yeah, you're here this week, so it is all good. By the way, with my face cam, guys, it's not going to be on the entire podcast. I'm going to have, a load of pictures going on during the podcast. So I will show my face at times, but at other times I will not. For example, I'm now going to go to some pictures right now. So let's get into the first of the driver moves for 2019. And the biggest one is Charles Leclerc going to Ferrari for 2019. Now, I've already done a video on this, and I do think Charles will succeed at Ferrari. I don't think he'll have a massively great season. So I don't think he's going to be as good as, say, Lewis Hamilton was in 2007. But I do think that he will, for most of the season, be right there with Sebastian Vettel. I think he has a better chance, to be honest, of winning the World Championship at Ferrari in 2020 more than 2019. I don't think he'll win the title in his first season. But yeah, I think Leclerc will succeed because he has enough talent to do so, and I think mentally is strong enough, and he has proven that during his racing career. Nib, do you think Leclerc will succeed at Ferrari? And for 2019, compared to his illustrious teammate Sebastian Vettel, how do you think he's going to do?
Well, of course, Sebastian Vettel will do Formula 1.
Hold on a minute. Hold on.
Obviously.
Hold on, mate. You're going really robotic.
No.
Yeah. Sorry about this, guys, but we have some connection issues. If you can try and solve them, Nib, then yeah, try. But yeah, I also want to say with Charles Leclerc, I have seen some people say with him that he hasn't done anything really amazing in his career, and that his teammate for 2018 wasn't exactly the greatest driver in the world in Marcus Ericsson. But you have to remember where Sauber were in 2017 and the great performances he put in compared to Ericsson in 2018. Now again, Ericsson is not a massively great driver. Plenty of drivers in the midfield are better than Marcus Ericsson, but Ericsson is not as bad as people think. I think Marcus deserved to stay on the grid for 2019 at Sauber. But I think Leclerc did enough impressive things to warrant a seat at Ferrari. For example, qualifying 8th at the French Grand Prix, qualifying so well at Brazil, and was out-qualified by Ericsson, just shows you how good Ericsson actually is. And Leclerc finished in P7 and wasn't actually that far off 5th and 6th place Bottas and Vettel, and Leclerc was in a car that was, at best, a second a lap slower than those cars. So I think Leclerc has done enough in terms of impressing to be at Ferrari. I think he has. I know Kimi Raikkonen did have a good 2018, and I think if Leclerc, say, say if this was a what-if scenario, if Charles Leclerc was not in Formula 1 in 2018, I think Kimi Raikkonen would have stayed at Ferrari for 2019 because Kimi did do well at Ferrari in 2018, and it was probably Kimi's second best season he's ever had at Ferrari. That's second behind, of course, his championship winning year in 2007. But I think Leclerc was just impressive enough in the Sauber. Nib, are you still there? Have you fixed your connection issues or not? Good.
Attempted to fix issues. I don't know how I'm sounding right now.
It sounds better now.
Okay, good. Well, I think Leclerc absolutely deserves to be driving for Ferrari this now. I think any criticism of him saying he hasn't done anything really special in his career, I mean, back and look at his G career, he nearly won Silverstone by 25 seconds. He was pulling out a second a lap on every other driver in the field. Like, the guy is incredible. He pulled off some incredible year. And I think, I really think he will do well this season, but I don't see him beating Sebastian Vettel, as I was mentioning before I went robotic. That I predicted that Sebastian Vettel will win the world title, so I don't think he'll go as well as Sebastian Vettel at Ferrari this year. I think he will be poor by any means. I still think he'll win a handful of races, whether that's 3 to 5. But I am winning this year. He's very consistent and very good around some tracks, and I've seen a couple of criticisms of his qualifying performances, so perhaps that's one thing he does need to improve on. I think it was a video by Autosport that were getting the best potential lap time in. He wasn't maximizing his lap, so I'm sure he's been working hard at that, much like Esteban Ocon was. So I think we will see a much better Charles Leclerc this season, and he was already pretty darn good last season.
Yeah, I think qualifying is definitely the area he needs to work on more compared to the race. I think the race is definitely better at that, but I think still good. And if you didn't know, guys, we did early 2019 predictions about or just over a month ago. You can find that episode in the podcast playlist. Nib did predict that Vettel would win the title. I actually predicted, and I do think, without knowing, of course, what the cars are going to be like in terms of performance, I think Charles Leclerc will just about beat Vettel in 2019. It is going to be very close, but I think Leclerc will have a successful first season, but I don't think he'll win the title. I don't think he will. And again, I think 2020 is the year where he is more likely to win the championship, because he'll have a year's worth of experience, and if he does beat Vettel in 2019, it's going to be more Charles Leclerc's team than it is Sebastian Vettel's. So he'll kind of be, I don't know, maybe more of a number one driver at Ferrari, but we'll have to see what happens, of course. And we'll move on from Charles Leclerc and go on to Pierre Gasly, who has come out and said this week that he intends not to be in Max Verstappen's shadow, but I'm afraid I think he is going to be, because, look, Pierre Gasly is a good driver, but I don't think he is good enough to be at this level. I don't think he is good enough to be fighting at the front of the field for podiums and race wins on a regular basis. I think Pierre Gasly is a midfield driver. He could improve to be a top driver, but right now, based on what I've seen, I think he is a midfield driver like a Sergio Perez or a Nico Hülkenberg, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for 2019, I don't, compared to Max, I don't see him regularly beating Max. I think the only time he'll beat Max is maybe when we go to a racetrack he likes a lot more, maybe like Bahrain, or if Max, I don't know, spins out during the race and has to fight back through the field, or if Max has a reliability issue. That's the only way I see Gasly beating Max, but on a normal day, Max Verstappen is going to beat Pierre Gasly quite comfortably, and I think Max is the #1 driver in that team. Red Bull, again, they won't come out and say that, as I said in my Daniel Ricciardo video, but yeah, Max is the clear #1, not just in terms of team status, but also in terms of just driver quality. Max Verstappen, I think, is easily a level above Pierre Gasly, and I hope Gasly, by the way, does prove me wrong. I do want to be proven wrong on Pierre Gasly, but I'm not sold on Pierre Gasly as a driver. I'm not sold on him yet. But Nib, what do you think about Pierre Gasly? Do you think he can, say, have a couple of races where he genuinely beats Max Verstappen? And do you think there is any chance he can step out of Max Verstappen's shadow?
I'm going to be echoing a lot of your thoughts here. I don't think Pierre Gasly will even out-qualify Max Verstappen the whole season legitimately. Max might have some reliability issues. Pierre qualifies ahead of him that way, but I don't think legit. Max will be out-qualified by him. Max is just a top world-class driver. He's up there really with me with Hamilton in terms of the best 2 drivers on the grid, and probably gets in at the bottom end of the top 10 best drivers on the grid, maybe even like the bottom 10. So yeah, I'm on Gasly because he was up against Hartley as much. I do like Brendan Hartley quite a lot. He was driving against Brendan Hartley, so beating Hartley is something he really should do, and he did do quite comfortably in the end. But yeah, he's certainly going to have to improve this qualifying and his race pace if he's going to be anywhere near close to Max Verstappen. So it'll be a very interesting year for Gasly. It's interesting what Red Bull are going to do with this second seat for the years to come, because Max is going to stay in that team as the #1 driver for a few years, at least a few years. So it'll be quite interesting to see who they have in this second driver's seat in the years to come. Will it be Pierre Gasly? Will he perform well enough? That remains to be seen. But you know, obviously we've got what's his face, Dan Ticktum, who I am no fan of, and I'm very sure Chaz isn't a fan of him either. He potentially could come into this second driver seat, but the dynamic at Red Bull this year is very interesting because they probably haven't had a second driver, say, post 2010, because Webber did become a second driver. He really did in 2010. That was the best Webber was at Red Bull, but after that it was pretty clear that Red Bull had a first and second driver for me. And then it was level with Ricciardo and Verstappen with Ricciardo and Vettel. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out at Red Bull this.
Yeah, it will be. It will be interesting. By the way, do I, by any chance, and I'll ask this to the chat as well, do I sound too quiet at all, Deb?
In my ear, you sound fine, but that might be just me having you up quite loud anyway.
Well, if you're watching, turn your volume up, because I have already tested this out, and if you do turn it up, the volume does, for me anyway, sound fine. But if you're having volume issues, and just turn it up as loud as you can to hear me, because yeah, to fix the background noise, I've had to turn the volume down and compress and do all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, you might have to turn me up in your ears. But anyway, we'll move on from Pierre Gasly and go on to the man I did a video on Wednesday. And by the way, Two things. Thank God I got that video out because I was working on it for so long and having so many equipment failures, editing software, computers. Thank God I got it out. And also, thank you guys for liking the video. And, well, the video is doing well, so thank you for that. But, as I said in that video, I think Daniel Ricciardo to Renault will work out eventually. In 2019, he's probably going to be consistently in the type of positions he was in 2015, where he was like, I think, was it P6, P7, P8, consistently around that area. I think that's where Ricciardo will be in 2019. But by 2021, if Ricciardo does trust what Renault are doing, and I think he should, because Renault have proven that they are making enough progress, then by 2021, Renault should at least have had, I don't know, 5 podiums and maybe a race win by the end of 2021. So I think it will work out for Ricciardo eventually. But yeah, for 2019, it's going to be a similar season for him that he had in 2015. If he does get a podium, I think similar to that season, I think was his only podium, I think was Hungary that season. And it was because that race was a crazy race. And I think that's the only way Ricciardo does get a podium this season is if we have a crazy Grand Prix at Baku or Monaco or, I don't know, a wet race at Spa, something like that. I don't see him getting a podium on genuine pace. I think it will be down to people crashing out or loads of incidents and excitement during the race. But Nib, what would you be happy with realistically for Ricciardo in 2019? Would you be happy considering the pace of the Renault car of 2018? Would you be happy if they were consistently in P7 and P8?
Yeah, realistically, the goal for Ricciardo next year is to finish P7 in the championship. I don't think Renault will be in the top 3. I think they will be closer to the top 3 than they were this past season. But with Ricciardo, yeah, it's very interesting, this move. I do agree with you. I think it will play out it will work out in the long run. But yeah, it's a big risk by Ricciardo. He does like taking some risks. We see that in his overtakes, and we see that in his hilarious Instagram videos that he posts on the regular. Those are quite funny. But for me, the more interesting thing is how he will go against Nico Hulkenberg, and conversely, how Hulkenberg will go against Ricciardo. I do really see Ricciardo as one of the top drivers on the grid, definitely behind Hamilton and Max, and so yeah, he's one of the best drivers on the grid. And a few years ago, everyone was really big on Hulkenberg and wanted him to get that drive and move to Ferrari, but it never eventually happened. So it'll be interesting to see how Hulkenberg does against Ricciardo, really, this season, because, well, it's an opportunity for Hulkenberg to show how good he is against a top class driver in Daniel Ricciardo. I do think that Ricciardo might pick up a podium if there's some crazy race, especially Baku. Baku has just thrown up some crazy races, and Ricciardo's pace is usually pretty good at Baku. So it'll be interesting to see also Ricciardo's motivation levels throughout the season, whether or not they drop, because there were some times during last season where he was quite a way off Max. But then when Red Bull were quick again in Mexico, boom, he was on pole. So it'll be interesting to see if Daniel can keep up his motivation level throughout the whole season and continue and putting in some good qualifying performances, because really he has to be getting P7 every qualifying session if Renault produced the car, of course. So yeah, it's a very big season for Hulkenberg. It really is. It's almost a career defining season for Hulkenberg. He's really going to be tested, and it will be interesting to see how Ricciardo settles into the team. You know, he knows a few people there, but it's all new for him. So, of course, being a Daniel Ricciardo fan, I hope he does well, and I do firmly believe that he will have a good 2019.
Yeah, with Hulkenberg, I agree. It is a career-defining season, and if he if he performs how we think he will, then I think I wouldn't say his career is done, but I think his hype and the talk about him is pretty much going to end, because if he is consistently, say, a quarter of a second behind Ricciardo, I don't think he will. I think he'll be closer. I think it'll be probably a 10th, something like that. But yeah, if he doesn't show why people rate him against Daniel Ricciardo, then he is going to be nailed down unless Renault become, you know, one of the top teams and as good as they were in 2005 and 2006. I don't see how Nico Hulkenberg ever drives for a top team or drives a car that is at the front or near the front of the field. I don't see how he does that. And to be honest, I don't believe in the Hulkenberg hype. I don't think he is as good as people say. I do think drivers such as Sergio Perez, I think Perez is a better driver. I think he proved that in his 3 seasons at Force India when they were teammates. I also think on his day, Romain Grosjean is better, but again, on his day. But yeah, I want Hulkenberg, like Gasly, I want Hulkenberg to surprise us. Show us something we didn't know you had. And hopefully he does, because I get the feeling that with Renault, it's going to be Ricciardo taking the fight to the top 3 teams, and then Hulkenberg is going to be kind of behind, not massively behind, but closer to, you know, Haas and Racing Point and, you know, teams and cars like that. So I hope he does prove me wrong. Right, we'll move on from Ricciardo and go on to Lance Stroll, who is driving for Racing Point in 2019. Now, listen, I'm not the biggest fan of Lance Stroll. I don't like him as a driver. I don't think he's good enough to be an F1 driver. I think his time in F1 so far has proven that. And can I also just make a point? Because this has really ticked me off lately when he was announced to be going to Racing Point. This agenda about he's never had a decent car. Williams in 2017 finished P5 in the Constructors. So how has he not had a decent car? And he also finished on the podium and qualified inside the top 10 at that race. How has he not had a decent car? So to anyone saying that, please answer that, because I want to know why you just missed that out. Because 2018, I agree, he didn't have a good enough car to properly showcase how good of a driver he was, even though I don't think he is good enough. But for 2017, he had a car that finished in the top 5 in the Constructors' Championship, and most of the time, he qualified between 13th and 19th. So, you know, I really want to know why people think he's never had a decent car, because he quite clearly has. But anyway, with Racing Point, if they do produce a car that is similar to the car they had during 2018, I think Stroll will score points, say 4 or 5 times at least, because he's that kind of driver that just hangs on and, you know, will get that odd point or 2. But if the car is as good as it was in 2017, maybe he can surprise us. We'll have to see. But we have also heard stories that Racing Point's simulations of their 2019 car have not exactly gone well. Hopefully that is or can be resolved by the time we get to pre-season testing and the first Grand Prix. But compared to Sergio Perez, I expect Lance Stroll to be beaten quite comfortably. I don't think Stroll is as good as Perez. I don't think Perez will out-qualify Stroll every single Grand Prix. But say, how many is it? 21 races. So 15 or 16 of the races, I think Sergio Perez will qualify him. In a similar-ish way to Max Verstappen and Pierre Gasly, I just think Perez is a level above Lance Stroll. Perez is a midfield driver. I think Lance Stroll is more of a back marker driver. So, yeah, I think Perez will quite comfortably beat Lance Stroll. But, again, hopefully Stroll proves me wrong. And if he does, you know what? I will be the first to say credit to Lance Stroll. He is good enough. He can be maybe a good midfield driver, even better than that in the future. But until then, I am going to maintain the opinion that I have. Hold on a minute. Just saying, I'm just looking at the chat. Apparently, my volume is too low. My volume too low? Doesn't look too low on my end, but anyway. Nib, what do you think about that then with Lance Stroll? Do you think with Racing Point he can work out? And do you think also that compared to Sergio Perez, do you think he can prove himself and actually prove that he's better than we thought he was?
I do think sometimes you are a bit harsh on Stroll. You know, he's a very young driver. He comes straight from European Formula 3, straight into F1. He's a very inexperienced driver. We could see that in the first couple of races at Williams, where when you were on board with him, it looked like a person who just picked up an F1 game for the first time. It was quite comical how shaky he was when turning the car. So I think that just shows he's sort of inexperienced to begin with. He never should have just jumped straight into Formula One. He wasn't ready, say, like Max Verstappen was. So I think some of the criticism on Stroll can be a little bit harsh, but he definitely deserves to be criticised. I don't think he is good enough for Formula One. He was thrown in the deep end because of his dad having money. But I do think this year he will perform a lot better than what he has been at Williams. I think he's going to be a much more motivated and much more focused Lance Stroll. I think that in qualifying he will out-qualify Sergio Perez on the odd occasion, because we have seen that Lance Stroll can pull out a lap out of nowhere. He's actually a good driver in the rain. We've seen that at Monza in 2017, I believe, in that wet qualifying session. There was at Monza this year. He had a very good qualifying session, so he is actually quite a good qualifier on his day. But that is on his day. He just needs to be a more consistent driver. If he picks up that consistency and is able to week in, week out, he then can become a good midfield driver, I believe. But the issue is he needs time, but in the world of Formula One, you don't have that time. But he does, sadly, because of his dad. So it's a very interesting and complex situation with Lance Stroll. I do just hope that he does have a good season, and I kind of hope that he proves some of the doubters and myself wrong.
I will say with the criticism of Lance Stroll, a lot of people immediately go to the pay driver thing, but I haven't actually. I've mentioned it as a criticism, but when he first came into F1, I never said, "Oh, he's a pay driver. He's not, good enough because he's a pay driver." I don't really care if he's a pay driver. I look at a driver based on the quality they show when they actually, do the race weekends. I don't care if they're paying for their seat, because Sergio Perez pays for his seat, but Sergio Perez has earned his seat also in Formula One, so I don't really care if he pays for his seat. I only care if, when it comes to the whole pay driver thing, I only care if that driver is clearly not good enough to be in F1 and is only in F1 because of his money. But when he came into F1, I gave him a chance. I gave him, I think, half a season, but then I realised by, was it Silverstone or Hungary, that he just wasn't good enough. especially in the Williams car in 2017, which was not as bad as the positions he was putting it in, even though he had a podium at Baku. But that podium at Baku was lucky. He definitely deserved a points finish, but I don't think he deserved a podium at all. But there you go. But hopefully he proves me wrong. Hopefully he does. But I'm not going to bet on it, because I think there is a very good chance this season that he could get really badly exposed by Sergio Perez. And if he gets badly exposed by Sergio Perez, who people love to criticise and say, oh, he's just a midfield driver, he was terrible at McLaren in 2013. If Perez exposes him, I don't think anyone out there can possibly defend Lance Stroll anymore. I don't think they can. But anyway, let's move on from Stroll and go to McLaren, who have an all-new driver lineup in Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris. Now, for Carlos Sainz, it's a bit sad for Sainz, because I thought Carlos Sainz would be a success at Renault and would beat Nico Hülkenberg and would be Daniel Ricciardo's teammate for 2019, but he didn't prove himself, and he was badly beaten by Hülkenberg, especially in the first half of that season. And I think Carlos Sainz failed when he got the chance to prove himself. He failed to prove himself, and now is at McLaren, who, even though they're putting new people in place and they're trying to swap people around, it's going to take a long time. If McLaren, do eventually with this current setup get back to the front, it's going to take 3 or 4 years to start winning races again. So he's at a team that are, I'm afraid, in transition, and I don't think Carlos Sainz is going to have that great of a season in terms of his actual results. But compared to Lando Norris, I think he will beat Norris, because I don't think Lando Norris is as good as people claim that he is. He did have a very successful junior Formula career, you cannot doubt that, but in Formula 2, when he went up against two drivers who are in F1 this season, who we will get onto later on in George Russell and Alexander Albon, he wasn't. There were moments where he impressed, you cannot doubt that, but he didn't impress enough compared to the hype that surrounds this guy. I don't think he is as good as people think he is, and maybe he isn't as good as he thinks he is. But I think if McLaren continue in the way they're going, and continue in the way they were going in 2018, I think Norris is going to be added to the graveyard of young driver careers at McLaren, because they really did harm Kevin Magnussen's career, even though he did find his way back. Sergio Perez, they basically ruined his career, because now he can't go to a top team because, McLaren in 2013, even though McLaren produced a car that was at best 5th fastest and was a midfield car. So I don't know why people think he's already had his chance when he didn't. He was in a midfield car, basically a sideways move. And Stoffel Vandoorne, who's now not in F1, is now a simulator driver. And Vandoorne, I think Vandoorne is better than Lance Stroll. I think Vandoorne, maybe if you look at all the racing drivers that could race in F1, maybe he wouldn't make the cut for all 20 seats, but he is better than, say, Stroll, who is on the F1 grid. And they have basically ruined his career by producing such a horrible car in which he couldn't do anything with. And I think if McLaren do again produce a horrible car, then I think Lando Norris is going to struggle and is probably going to succumb to the same fate that Perez, Magnussen, Vandoorne, even Alonso, even though of course he's not a young driver, even Alonso and Jenson Button succumbed to, where the car is just not good enough and they're fed up, and it's actually ruining their stock value in F1, that they have to either leave the sport or go to another team. So for Norris, it is vital that the McLaren car is better, because if it's not, I think his career is going to be harmed at McLaren. But Nib, enough of me rambling. What do you think about McLaren then for Sainz and Norris? Who do you think is going to win that battle? And yeah, what do you think about those respective drivers and what they will or what they should do for 2019?
I think Carlos Sainz will win this battle at McLaren. I do like Lando Norris as a guy. I think most people really do like him. You can see what a nice bloke he is with like videos and stuff he does on iRacing. He's just a nice bloke, but there has been a few people saying, is he too nice for Formula One? And that's a very good question. Is this guy too nice for Formula One? He may just be, but you know, whether you're nice on or off the track, I don't think that really matters. Once you get in that, once you put that helmet on and you're on the track, you're a different person completely. And I do think Lando will have a good season. I don't think he will be as good as some people think he is. We've said this before. Wasn't really impressed with him in F2. Um, he just was outperformed by drivers who look better than him after the whole of last season. So I think Norris will still do well, but not as not hype train level, that people think he will do. So with Carlos Sainz, it's a very I don't know, it's just very disappointing because I do like Carlos Sainz as a driver. Um, he's a very likable bloke. He drives. He's very. I don't know. There's something about Carlos Sainz. I just like him as a driver. So I do really hope he does well at McLaren. I hope that he is the driver that can lead McLaren back up towards the top end of the grid, because I do believe with some nurturing that he can become a top of the grid driver. Even though he was outperformed by Hulkenberg at Renault, I still really think he is a real talent. So I do think he will beat Norris next season, this upcoming season. So yeah, but it all depends on what sort of car that McLaren do produce. They have gone in the right direction with the appointment of the former Porsche boss. So hopefully there are some exciting times ahead for McLaren.
Yeah, with Carlos Sainz, I used to be, could have called me a fanboy of Carlos Sainz, honestly, back in the day. Stretching back to his days in Formula Renault 3.5 in 2014, I thought this guy was the next big thing. I thought this guy would be winning races and would be talked about in the same vein as, say, a Charles Leclerc or a Max Verstappen, honestly. I honestly thought that. But 2018, again, it's just really disappointed me. It really disappointed me. But for McLaren, yeah, it's going to be an interesting season for McLaren, and interesting between those two drivers. Also, I do want to mention, and I'm probably going to say this again when we get to Alexander Albon later on, I've seen a lot of people saying, "Oh, Albon, he's the worst driver on the grid. He's not good enough to be an F1." Please remember, he was ahead of Lando Norris in the F2 Drivers' Championship until the final race, where he stalled on the grid, and that's why he finished behind Norris. Basically, was because he stalled on the grid, and then I think he had to start at the back for the sprint race. So that's the reason he finished behind Norris. Because the reason Russell was pushed until the final race until he won his title was because Albon was in second and Norris had blown it with a terrible weekend in Russia, where he completely bottled it. So look, Norris is good, you cannot doubt that, and I think the field of drivers in F2 that we had last season was probably one of, if not the best we've ever had. But he's not as good as people want to claim. He's not as good as people want to claim. And if he is in a car that is, say, as good as Albon's car, I think Albon will be better than Norris, and I think Russell will if the Williams car is as good as the McLaren car. But we'll have to see in 2019. Let me just switch back to this. Right, and what we're going to do now, guys, is we're going to read through your comments in the chat. So in the chat, or not, is it not down there? It's over here somewhere. Put in the chat what you think about these drivers, and do you think they're actually going to have a good 2019? And what do you think about what we've said on these certain drivers? And we'll have a look at the chat right now. So Will F1 saying, by the way, sorry if I have to look past the microphone. My computer's right here. Will F1 saying Renault having a better driver lineup. Yeah, Renault have improved on their driver lineup. That's no doubt about that. Tonka Toy Truck, people forget they were 5th in 2016, 4th in 2017 and 2018. Not quite sure who he's talking about there. We've got someone else saying, yeah, I'm expecting Renault to be a title contender by 2021 or maybe 2022. Renault's aim, they set this plan in 2016. Their aim is to be by 2022 or by the end of 2022 able to win races and compete for the World Championship, whether that's constructors or drivers. Now, I know 2022 doesn't seem far away, but it is in F1 terms. A lot is going to happen between now and 2022. So if they are not too far off Red Bull and are comfortably 4th in the constructors in 2019, they could be at that level for 2022, because again, look how far they've come since the start of 2016. They had the 9th best car in 2016, then the 6th best car, or 6th in the constructors in 2017, and then they were 4th in 2018. That's just in 2 years and 3 seasons. So a lot can happen. So we'll see what they can do. But I think Renault will. I think they will by 2022 be at a race-winning level. I do think they will. Right, let me just look at some more comments. The F1 Kaiser. Leclerc I'm worried about since he is jumping from a Sauber to a Ferrari, plus the stress if he doesn't win. But Leclerc seems good to win a race. The pressure is on for Charles Leclerc because I think people are expecting him to be a successor to Sebastian Vettel. But I don't think the pressure should be massively put on straight away. Yes, he is a driver for the future who could be an amazing driver, but he's still, what, 21, 22 years old? So let's wait. Let's not put too much pressure on him. Simon Cragland saying Albon is a very good driver, but he hasn't been driving in a Formula 1 car yet, so I think he will struggle in the beginning, but overall I think he will impress. I think Albon is a lot better than people give him credit for. I think Albon, if the Toro Rosso car is, say, as good as it was in 2018, I think Albon will have 3 or 4 points finishes, and a couple of them might be really impressive. So we'll see. Right, I'll just look for a couple more comments, and then we'll move on to the rest of the drivers that are at new teams or, are making their debuts in Formula 1. Tonka Toy Truck saying Red Bull will keep 3rd, Renault will be lucky to beat Haas. I don't think that will be the case. I know you've been saying that you think Renault are going to struggle, but I think you'll be surprised. But if you're right, then you can tell me that I was wrong after pre-season. Kvyat won't last long before. Will F1 saying Kvyat won't last long, dropped before 2020. I wouldn't be surprised if he was dropped for 2020 and if 2019 was his last season. But look, I don't hate Dan Ticktum, but he's so incredibly annoying and such a spoiled brat. How that guy is even in contention for a seat in F1 is beyond me. If I was in charge of the Red Bull driver program, he would not be within a million miles of my driver program. He's a spoilt brat, and he has such a poor attitude to racing. Just look what he did. I think was it in 2016 or 2015 where he overtook 16 cars under a safety car and crashed into someone deliberately. He accused Mick Schumacher or the F3 series of cheating to get Mick Schumacher to win. And then he did that interview a week ago where he came off as a spoilt brat, and then he walked off the podium basically because he didn't win. And he hasn't won a race yet in that series, in that winter series. I can't remember what the series is called, but it's a series in Asia or in Japan. But yeah, I wouldn't want him in a million miles. I would not want him, anywhere near my F1 team at all. Will F1, how old is Dan Ticktum? I think he is 19. And I know you might say, oh, well, he's young. Max Verstappen, I know he's been very impetuous when he's been growing up in F1 since he joined the sport when he was, 17 years old. But he hasn't done what Dan Ticktum has done. Dan Ticktum doesn't have the excuse of, I'm 19 years old, so cut me some slack. There are plenty of 19-year-olds who don't act like they're 9 years old. So, yeah, I just don't like Ticktum. And someone saying in chat, Ticktum is not as mental as Ferrucci. Ticktum is basically the British version of him, but yeah, not as bad. Definitely not as bad. But anyway, I think now we will move on to the rest of the drivers. And again, by the way, if my volume is low, I have brought the microphone closer to me. Yeah, just turn your volume up as much as you can, because to me it sounds fine. So yeah, just turn it up as much as you can. Anyway, let's move on to the rest of the drivers. And let's go to Sauber. And first off, Kimi Raikkonen, who is returning to the team he drove for in his first season of F1 racing in 2001. And if Sauber continue the progress they made in 2018, and it looks as though they're going to, because I covered this story last week on This Week in F1, where Frederick Vasseur came out and said that they've actually been working on the 2019 car for a long time. And that is a scary prospect if you are a front-running midfield team. Even Renault, if Renault don't get their car as right as they want to. So Sauber could be very good in 2019. And if they are, then Kimi Raikkonen, he's the right person to have in that team, because if the car is, say, in a similar position to what the Haas car was like, then the reason he's the right man is because he will not bottle it under pressure, make silly mistakes. He will keep it consistent, keep it cool, as he usually does, because he is the Iceman. And yeah, he will get the best out of that car, and he will get the points finishes that the car deserves, instead of, Magnussen and Grosjean, who at Haas, some of the time they do get good points finishes that the car deserves, and sometimes they don't because they just aren't consistent enough. But Kimi Raikkonen, I think, will be. And as long as the Sauber car is good enough for points, I think Kimi Raikkonen will be in the points a lot of times during 2019. But for Antonio Giovinazzi, I think when it comes to Giovinazzi, again, he's another driver who I'm not sold on. He is very quick. He is a good driver, no doubt about it. And I am interested to see, now given a full season of F1 racing, how he's going to do. And I will reserve my full opinion on him until probably Silverstone, or Hockenheim, because by then he should have shown us if he's good enough or not. But I feel as though Giovinazzi, that if the car is good, he will be good. But if the car isn't good, I don't think he I don't think he'll do well. So I kind of feel for him to have a successful first season, I think he needs the Sauber car to be as good as it was in the last 2 or 3 races of 2018, but consistently over the course of 2019. And if it is, I think Giovinazzi will do enough to impress people and maybe move up the ladder or stay at Sauber for 2020. But if the Sauber car is worse and in a lot lower position than we're expecting, then I don't know why, I just think because of his lack of experience and his tendency to make mistakes, silly mistakes, I think he'll struggle if the Sauber car is also struggling. But Nib, what do you think about Sauber's driver lineup, and how do you think Kimi Raikkonen will get on? And also for Giovinazzi, do you think, 1, he's good enough, and 2, do you think he will show us that he is good enough to be in F1?
Well, we'll start off with Kimi Raikkonen here. I think it's the absolute perfect signing for Sauber in terms of what they need and in what a midfield team needs. A driver who is consistent, who usually stays out of trouble, although who knows with how chaotic the midfield usually is. He could end up in some trouble next season. But yeah, we're mainly going to focus on Giovinazzi here. He is nowhere near the level of Leclerc, and I think Kimi is only a tiny bit behind Leclerc. So I do think that Kimi will wallop Giovinazzi this season. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. He's obviously missed a whole year of driving. So it'll be interesting to see how he's able to go straight into the car. I think preseason testing will be absolutely massive for him to be able to get used to the car, and for him just to be able to get to come to grips with how powerful and how much grip there is in the Formula One car. So yeah, it's definitely a lot more pressure on Giovinazzi here. There's absolutely no pressure on Kimi Raikkonen at all, and I think he will thrive in that situation at Sauber. He's already come out and said that he's going to be a lot more happier at Sauber than he was at Ferrari, even though everyone at Ferrari loved Kimi and he loved Ferrari. He just thrives in a lower pressure environment, and we did see that when he was at Lotus to a certain extent. So an interesting year for Sauber after coming off the back of a very successful season. I feel as if their driver lineup, honestly, is a little bit worse. I don't think that Giovinazzi is better than Ericsson. So hopefully he proves me wrong, because I always like being proven wrong. You know, it's just a wee bit of fun. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the drivers of Sauber perform in 2019.
Yeah, I think their driver lineup is worse than it was for 2018. I think Ericsson deserved to be at Sauber for 2019, and I think Kimi and Ericsson actually would have been a great partnership at Sauber. But yeah, I think, and I'll be looking out for Giovinazzi when I go to pre-season. By the way, if you don't know, I am going to be covering pre-season testing live, not literally live, but from the track, camera, microphone and all. But I will be interested to watch Giovinazzi, because the last thing he needs to do is, well, there's 8 days of testing. The last thing he needs to do is crash on, 3 of the 4 days that he gets to do, or something like that. He can't have loads of accidents in preseason testing. He has to be quick, of course, and impress his team, but he cannot go and bin it loads of times, because one, Sauber can't afford new parts as much as a team like Ferrari, and also going to the first race, if he ends up crashing a lot, then he's going to have no real confidence going into the weekend, and is going to be a bit behind his teammate and the rest of the field in terms of confidence with his car and with his own driving style with the car that he has. So he has to be quick in pre-season, but not overly aggressive. Just don't, go and have loads of silly accidents because that's the last thing Sauber needs. The last thing that Giovinazzi needs. But
don't go and do a Lance Stroll like he did a couple of years ago.
Yeah, don't do that. That's the last thing you need to do as a Lance Stroll. I actually thought of that just a moment ago. But yeah, don't do a Lance Stroll. But yeah, we'll move on from Sauber and go on to Toro Rosso, who have an all-new driver lineup. Danny Kvyat is returning and deserves to return. He should never have been dropped from Toro Rosso because he is good enough to be an F1. I think he has proven that in his time in Formula One, has had a couple of podiums, was unfairly dropped from Red Bull, even though, of course, he's not as good as Max Verstappen. His dropping was unfair and was total BS, in my opinion. But he does deserve to be an F1. And I think if he can have, say, his best season ever this season, then that should be enough to keep a seat. Maybe not in F1, or maybe not to Toro Rosso, but probably in F1 for 2020. And I think he will, because I think Kvyat is underrated, and I think at his best he can be, say, a Grosjean or a Perez or a Magnussen level driver. I think he is that good. But with Alexander Albon, again, I think people are underrating Albon a lot. You have to remember he had, compared to Lando Norris, who gets a lot of people, or a lot of people talk about Norris more than Albon. Albon had more pole positions and I think 3 or 4 more race wins than Norris. It was at least 3 more race wins than Norris, and took the F2 Championship to the final race in Abu Dhabi. So I think Albon, to be honest, is being underrated a lot. And I think if the Toro Rosso car is as good as it was at the end of last season, which was, say, 12th or 13th in qualifying, but in the race, because the Toro Rosso car tends to have good race pace. If it's around 9th or 10th position in the race, I think Albon will get some points finishes. I think 3 or 4 at least. And I think he'll impress. I think people are really underrating Albon. But if he doesn't work out, then I will be the first to say that Albon hasn't worked out. And of course, as someone said in the chat a minute ago, yes, he hasn't had as much F1 car testing as Norris or Russell. But as we saw with Kimi Raikkonen, I think, even though back in those days you were allowed to test a lot more, in terms of racing in open wheel cars, Kimi Raikkonen, when he came into F1, had barely done any compared to the drivers he was going up against, but he worked out. I'm not saying Albon is going to be like Kimi Raikkonen, but you see what I mean. And Albon is actually quite a bit experienced at his current age. Sorry, I think Albon is nicely experienced, and I think he will do well in 2019. Nib, how do you think these two Toro Rosso drivers will get on? And for Albon, if given a good enough car, do you think he can impress enough to maybe partner Ticktum or, stave him off?
I'm not too sure if he will survive the Ticktum, which will eventually arrive, because Red Bull are just very keen on him, even though it's quite clear that Christian Horner is not so keen on him. But focusing on Albon and Kvyat here, I absolutely agree with you. Alexander Albon has gone under the radar massively. Of course, the driver from Thailand, I want to make that clear, from Thailand.
Yeah.
So I think he will do a good job against Daniel Kvyat. I think Kvyat, just the more experienced and in my opinion, the better driver, will beat him. But I don't think it will be any sort of smashing. Albon is a very clearly talented driver, and I think most people who are saying this weren't watching F2 last year. He was pushing Russell more than any other driver on the grid, certainly a lot more consistently than Norris was. So I think Albon will impress. I do think he is a quality driver, and it will be interesting to see whether or not he will be able to cut the grade in this sport. I think some criticisms of him being like the worst driver on the grid are very, very unfair. I think it's quite clear who the worst driver on the grid is. To anyone who follows the sport, it's very clear. I don't even need to say his name. But yeah, a very big year for Daniel Kvyat. He's got a massive point to prove. He's a good driver. He's a very good midfield driver, and I do believe he will prove that in this upcoming season.
Yeah, with Albon, again, I think people just didn't pay attention to him in F2, and I did because I watched plenty of races and did a mid-season and a end-of-season review for F2, but Albon did push Russell harder than Norris did, and again had more race wins, more pole positions, and forced the F2 title fight to go to the final race when it really should have been over after Russia, but he forced it to go one race more. So yeah, I think Albon, if given a good enough car and not put under massive pressure, even though he probably will be because of the driver behind him that's probably going to be in that seat for 2020, I think he'll do well. I think he will do well. And another thing about, I just want to say about Dan Ticktum, because it does look likely he's going to be in the Toro Rosso for 2020 or maybe 2019 if one of the drivers really messes up and just doesn't perform. If you actually look at Dan Ticktum, he hasn't had that impressive of a junior Formula career. He has won races. I think he's won a couple of titles, but they're not massively prestigious. But if you look at Euro F3, when he competed against Mick Schumacher, he bottled the championship to Mick Schumacher. He succumbed to the pressure and then bottled it, and then ever since then he's just had a really poor attitude. So I think as well, when it comes to these two seats at Toro Rosso, I think Ticktum is going to play a bigger role in who is in that, what the driver lineup is at Toro Rosso for 2020, because if he continues with this spoiled brat attitude, then it could end up being Kvyat and Albon for 2020. But if he stops and actually performs, then he'll probably replace, I'd imagine it'll probably be Kvyat, to be honest, at Toro Rosso. But yeah, we'll see. And I just want to mention as well, Charles Leclerc, he's a driver that rates Alexander Albon very highly because of their fight for the GP3 title in 2016. So Charles Leclerc rates him highly and I think he said that he gave him a really good fight in that season. So if he rates him highly, then he should be a good driver. And well, we'll see. But we'll go on to our final team, and that is Williams, of course. And in those two seats are, first off, your Formula 2 champion, George Russell. I wouldn't say well, I'll basically say it. I am a fan of Russell. I do like Russell. I think I think people don't rate him highly enough. I think he has shown in his junior Formula career that he is a very good driver, very quick, also consistent, and he does have similarities to Sebastian Vettel in terms of he's very good at getting that pole position. I know at times Vettel in 2018 was, the second half of the season, so forget that. But he reminds me more of, say, Vettel in his younger days, where, again, very good at getting the pole position and very good at leading the pack away from a safety car or at the start of a race. He does remind me of Sebastian Vettel a bit. But I will say with Russell, the only area of his game I'm a bit concerned about is I don't think he has proven himself to be a quality overtaker. He can have a great battle with people, but I don't think he has proven himself to be a great overtaker. We'll see in 2019, but I think he does have to prove himself when it comes to that. But when it comes to whether he's going to have a good season or not, it's down to Williams producing a good enough car in 2019. I don't think they will, because Williams are losing lost Martini as a sponsor, so they're going to have a lot less money to play with. So if they don't design that good of a car, they're not going to develop it or be able to develop it as much as they want for 2000 or during 2019. So Russell probably going to suffer when it comes to that. But hopefully for him, the Williams car is a big step up on last season. And with Robert Kubica, he returns to the sport, and I cannot wait to see this guy back in Formula One. His last race was the 2010 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, and again, I cannot wait to see this guy in a car again, in an actual Grand Prix meeting. Will he do well enough, though? I am tempted to say that he will have... There'll be races where he does, is good. Say like a Canada, or I'm trying to think of other races where he's good at. I think Bahrain, tracks like that, or Spa. He'll have good races. But right now, of course, we don't really know anything. I'm tending to think he's probably not going to be quite as good as people are hoping. He's definitely not going to be as good as he was in 2010. There is absolutely no chance of that happening. The injuries he have had a bad effect on his career. Not a massively bad effect, of course, because he's back in F1. But there is no way he is better with the injuries to his hand. There's no way. There is absolutely no chance that he is better. So I think Kubica will have good races, but I'm tending to think, honestly, that he just won't be as good as people think, and he'll kind of disappoint people. Not in a bad way, because I think we're all willing to give him that chance of proving himself, to prove he's good enough again. But I just have a bad feeling when it comes to Robert Kubica. But Nib, when it comes to Williams, for Russell, how do you think he'll do? And for Kubica, do you think he will prove that he can be good enough to be in the sport again and be anywhere near the level he was at?
I absolutely think he can. I really do like Robert Kubica. He was one of my favourite drivers back in the day. And I've said this before about Kubica. If you don't know, you just don't know. Like, I don't think people understand just how good Robert Kubica was back in the day. Obviously, the horrific injuries which he suffered on his hand and arm are probably going to affect him. But I do still think he will give Russell a good fight. I do think Russell will beat him, and that's a good call that you made. That he reminds you of Sebastian Vettel, and I actually tend to agree. He does remind me a little bit of Sebastian Vettel, but I think he is a little bit more mentally stronger than Sebastian Vettel. So it's going to be interesting to see how Russell does perform in his first season in Formula One. It's going to be an interesting season for him, because if he does really produce and perform well, he could jump ahead of Esteban Ocon for the next spot at Mercedes. So a very important season for Russell. And if he does perform well, there could be very big rewards at the end of the season for him. He was the class of the field in F2 last year. That was clear to see. And I think he will be better than Kubica. I do think he will beat him at most races, but with Robert's experience, I think he will be a tiny little bit more consistent than George. But whether that means consistently worse or consistently better, I'm not too sure, really. But yeah, I do think Russell will have a good season. It obviously depends a lot on how good the Williams car is for next year, or sorry, for this year. And yeah, it will be very interesting to see how these two go on. It's probably one of the weaker driver lineups, just because we haven't seen it in a while. So it'll definitely be an interesting season to see how Williams go on.
Make a good point with Kubica because I think again people don't understand how good this guy was. In 2008, after the Canadian Grand Prix, which he won in a BMW 1-2, he was leading the Drivers' Championship by 4 points, I think, from Felipe Massa. And at that point, BMW, because they were so confident for 2009 and it crashed and failed, if you're wondering what happened, they were so confident for 2009, they gave up development on the 2008 car when Kubica was leading the Drivers' Championship. And I think, and you can criticize me and say what you want, if BMW had gone all in on the 2008 car, I think Robert Kubica would have won the 2008 championship. Because if you look at the first 7 or 8 races it was that season, he was consistently in the top 2 or 3 every Grand Prix, in qualifying, in the Grand Prix. He was so consistent, so fast. I think Malaysia, he finished in 2nd. Bahrain, he had his first pole position and finished on the podium. He finished, I think, P4 in Spain, P4 in Turkey, 2nd at Monaco, 1 at Canada. Do you see what I mean? He was so consistent, getting big points finishes. And if you look at how at times inconsistent Hamilton and Massa were, I think Kubica would have won the championship if BMW had gone all in on the 2008 car. And it was a horrible mistake by BMW to focus on 2009 when they had the 2008 championship sitting right there for them to take. I can't believe they decided to do that because, again, Kubica, I think, would have won the Drivers' Championship. And another interesting point you make with Russell is, yeah, if he's a mentally stronger version than Sebastian Vettel, then we could be onto a very, very good driver. And another point you make, which I think people are kind of forgetting, if he does massively outperform that car at a, say, Charles Leclerc or Max Verstappen 2015 level, if he outperforms that car by a lot, he could take the 2nd seat at Mercedes for 2020. He really could. And to be honest, if he if he does really impress in that car, I think he would kind of be more deserving of being in that seat, because I've said this before and I've seen a couple other YouTubers make videos about this. Esteban Ocon is not as good as people claim him to be, and I think is overhyped. I don't think he has done enough yet to earn a seat at Mercedes or a top team. I don't think he has done enough. He hasn't beaten Sergio Perez, who again gets criticised so much for the whole McLaren 2013 thing. Ocon can't even beat him, and he hasn't had a podium when he has had opportunities to. So if Russell does have a Charles Leclerc-like season, yeah, Russell at Mercedes, I don't see why not. And I think Hamilton would be all for that. If he is the person to replace Valtteri Bottas. We'll have to see how Bottas does, though, at that team. But that is it for the our opinions on the drivers going to new teams, and also the drivers either coming back to the sport or making their debuts. But before we get on to the Q&A, guys, which, by the way, is going to be, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes, I just want to get Nib's opinion on the news about Maurizio Arrivabene. Nib, what did you think about that, Arrivabene being sacked and replaced by Mattia Binotto? I've had my opinion, of course, I disagree. But what's your opinion? Do you think it's right? And do you think Binotto is the right man to lead Ferrari forward?
I think it was inevitable that this was going to happen. There's been a power struggle at Ferrari for a number of years now between Binotto and Arrivabene. It's very surprising to me that it's happened so close to the start of the season, but I really do like the appointment of Binotto. Binotto has been the driving force of why Ferrari has come back and been successful again. He started off with the engine, and then he moved to the aerodynamic department, and now they had the best car last season in my opinion. For the majority of the season, they had the best car. And now with him at the top of the team, I think he really is the right man to lead Ferrari back to the top of the Formula One world. Now, saying that, I do feel very bad for Maurizio Arrivabene because a lot of blame was put on him when it wasn't him at all making any of the decisions. Of course, it was the Ferrari strategist that was making most of the horrific decisions, but I he had a lot of passion. He was very passionate. It was good to see that passion back at Italia, back at Ferrari. That Italian flair, it was really nice to see that. And Binotto's more of that calmer, more cool and collected sort of gentleman. So I do think it is a good appointment by Ferrari, and I do really hope that Ferrari can sustain that title bid over a whole season because it's just fallen apart at the end of the season the last 2 years. So hopefully, with Binotto at the head of Ferrari now, they can sustain the title bid for the whole season.
Again, if you haven't seen the last episode of This Week in F1, I did a whole piece on the whole Arrivabene news, and I do disagree. I do have my reasons, and you can go and check it out in that video. Did about half an hour on the topic, but it feels, and someone commented on that video, I think John Hubner, I don't know if he's watching right now, but he said it's similar to football. The manager, I guess you could call Arrivabene, gets the blame. And I understand that, but a lot of times in football, and it's kind of similar in F1 as well, the problem goes deeper than just getting rid of one man. And I think the problem is deeper than just getting rid of Maurizio Arrivabene. And I'll still say this, Inaki Rueda, he is the Ferrari strategist. He has to go. He has no idea what he's doing. Mattia Binotto, I will give a lot of credit. He has, performance-wise, put them back to where they deserve to be. But he also contributed to them losing both championships. So you cannot act like he is, like he's Ferrari's saviour. He is also responsible. And I think also should take or share more blame for Ferrari's failures in the last couple seasons. And of course, Sebastian Vettel's mistakes has also cost Ferrari a lot. And if he does it again, Vettel, and blows another championship lead, I think Vettel kind of has to go because that's 3 seasons in a row. And I don't think he can be tolerated at that team any longer after that. I don't know who replaces him, but if Vettel bottles another championship lead in the way he did in 2017 and 2018, I think he does have to go. That's a sad thing to say, but I think he does because it's not going to work out if he keeps making these mistakes. But hopefully, Binotto is the right man for the job, and it does help Ferrari. I don't think
I want to continue this. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't too sure when you're going to end there, but Binotto, he's led like Ferrari back 2014 before he took over the engine department. Look how poor they were. Ferrari were awful in 2014. They were that bad that they drove Fernando Alonso out of the team, and that's something. Ferrari losing arguably the best driver on the grid. In 2015, look how much better they were. Their engine was the second best on the grid when it was, well, probably definitely one of the worst on the grid. It was not good at all. And then you look at last year, it was the best engine on the grid for the majority of the season. Their car, their aerodynamics needed to improve. He went there, he sorted it out. I do honestly believe that he is the man for the job in this team. He's a great organizer. It's clear to see he's organized the team and focused them where they needed to be focused on and improved the car continually over the past couple of years. So I think he really is the man for the job at Ferrari.
I still disagree. I just like he is obviously a great technical guy, and again, I give him massive credit. He put Ferrari back where they deserve to be, but I don't think his area of expertise should be as boss of the entire team. Because look at the best team principals, a lot of them aren't technical guys. You know, Adrian Newey has never been a team principal, and that's for good reason because there's better people to be in that position. And luckily for Red Bull, they have Christian Horner. I don't think he'll work out in that role. And also, if Vettel and Leclerc come to blows, I don't think he has a strong enough personality to deal with that. And if it does come to something similar to Hamilton and Rosberg, then I think Arriva Bene would have been better in that role because he's a lot more forthright. He has a bigger personality, but you get the feeling with Arriva Bene that if he lays down the law, you're going to follow it. If he tells you, right, stop any of this funny business or crashing or antics, you know, if the teammates are doing that they would listen. With Binotto, I'm just not sure they would listen as much because he doesn't come across as a big personality or as a forthright guy who would lay down the rules to the drivers. And I just think he's not got a big enough personality for that role. But again, I could be proven wrong. Hopefully I am, but I don't think he will. I don't think he'll work out in that role, but we'll see what happens. But right, we will now move on quickly. We'll probably do it for about 10 minutes or something like that. We will now go on, guys, to the Q&A. So make sure in the chat over here, I think it is, again, put comments in the chat, what you think about what we've been saying, the Arriva Bene stuff. Just put comments in the chat and also questions, and we'll try to answer as many as possible. And also, I do need your guys' attention once I get to the outro, because I need to ask something of you guys that is very important, and it has to do with something that is going to be quite fun for some of you if you do actually rise to it and get involved. Basically, you have the chance to be involved and be on next week's podcast and on a video that is coming out next week. So listen to the end and listen to what I have to say, and then we'll go from there. But right, I'll have a look at the chat and see what you guys are saying about what we've been talking about. Talk a Toy Truck says, but I agree with Chazza, he did not deserve to be fired. I'm concerned that Binotto will be stretched too thin. He is a tech man, not a manager. I am told he is very reserved. That's the concern I have. I think he's a bit too reserved. If he had the technical knowledge he does have, but had a bit more passion. I'm not saying he's not passionate. Of course he is. I'm sure he's as passionate as every single Ferrari worker, but if he had the passion of Arriva Bene with the technology he does have, he'd be perfect for that role, but we'll have to see. Summer Cracklin asks an interesting question, which I've seen come up over the past few days. I'll ask this to Nib. Bottas to drive for Williams in 2020. I think this is a lot more likely than people think, because if he gets dropped from Mercedes, where is he going to go? Where is he going to go? He could go to Racing Point if Perez doesn't perform. If he doesn't go there, he'll go to Williams. But will he go to Williams if Kubica, performs and Russell perform? I don't know. But if he does stay in F1, then yeah, Williams is the most likely place I see him staying. Nib, what do you think about that? Do you think he'll stay at Mercedes or go to Racing Point or Williams? What do you think is going to happen with Bottas?
I think if Bottas does leave Mercedes, I think he will be going back to Williams. I think they'll welcome him back with open arms. He was a really good driver for them, and they allowed him to leave. So I think there's still some good bridges there with Williams. So I do think that he will end back up at Williams if he does leave Mercedes.
Yeah, I think it is likely, and he has relationships with people at that team, so it make perfect sense. Um, with F1, do you think Schumacher, Mick Schumacher, of course, will be at Sauber in 2020 if he wins F2? He has just joined the Ferrari Driver Academy. I don't know if that's been confirmed, but I think it basically has been confirmed that he's joined the Ferrari Driver Academy. And that's a good thing for Mick Schumacher, because if he does win the F2 title and Giovinazzi doesn't impress, then he's going to replace Giovinazzi and be in F1 for 2020. But we'll have to see, of course, what he does. But yeah, I just look at the question again. Yeah, I think if he wins F2, I think he'll most likely be in F1 unless Giovinazzi does something amazing. So we'll see about that. Simon Cragland asks, who do you think will drive for Mercedes in 2020 next to Hamilton? I think it'll be Ocon in the end. I think it will be Ocon, even though I don't think he deserves that seat. But I'm kind of hoping I kind of hope that Bottas keeps it and really surprises us in 2019. But yeah, I think it's going to be Ocon, to be honest. But I don't think he deserves it. I don't think he's done enough to have that seat. Simon Craglan also says Mick Schumacher could be a subject for Haas as well. Maybe, but Haas don't. They have a technical relationship with Ferrari, but they don't listen to Ferrari as much as, say, Sauber do. They don't have as close of a relationship as Sauber do. So that depends on what Magnussen and Grosjean do. But we'll see when it comes to that. Tonka Toy Truck, Vettel will remain until two drivers are identified to replace him and Kimi. I don't think he'll go to Sauber, by the way, with Sebastian Vettel. I think on This Week in F1 in the chat last week, people were saying that, but I think if they identify a target to replace Vettel and he continues to not perform how he should for a four-time world champion, I think he will be replaced. I think he will be, and I think he deserves to be if that continues. Hopefully he does actually show why he is a four-time world champion. Simon Cragler, Mercedes kind of owe Ocon a seat because he would be driving F1 right now if he hadn't had the Mercedes link. No, I disagree. I disagree because yeah, you could argue that because he's with Mercedes, he's not in. Well, it's true because he is signed up with Mercedes and has a contract with them, he can't be on the grid for 2019. But I don't think that means that they owe him a seat at the top team that have been winning championships for what, 4 or 5 years straight. I don't think that means he should stay. Or should go to Mercedes rather. Oh yeah, that's another thing I want to ask you, Nib, and Tonka Toy Truck just mentioned his name. What did you think about, or what have you thought about the news about Pascal Wehrlein becoming development driver at Ferrari? I actually think that this could be a better way back in to the sport, because I mean, look at Kvyat. He was I think the simulator driver or development driver in 2018, and he's back in F1. So could this be a way back in for Wehrlein, do you think?
Yes, I do think that the Ferrari way of going is a lot more secure than, say, a Mercedes or Red Bull, perhaps, of getting back into the sport. And he will play a very pivotal role in whether or not Ferrari challenge for the title this year. You know, the work that Giovinazzi and Kvyat were doing on the simulator last year for Ferrari was vital in the reason why they were so long in the championship. So yeah, I think he will be very important, and maybe there's some inside knowledge that he can perhaps give to Ferrari. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe he can do that. We'll see. Um, because we went for so long, I think we're not gonna take too many more questions because again we did go for quite a long time about the drivers and their new teams and people making their debuts or re-debuts in F1. Right, let me just. Vernon is racing in Formula E at the moment. Yes, he is, but he's not enjoying himself. He threw a fit basically after his last FE race, I think. Tonka Toy Truck says Bottas to Haas. Yeah, I think Simon Cracklin's just saying they're not impossible, but I don't see it. I don't think they'll take Bottas. Say Regara says Daniel Ricciardo had 2 podiums. Or oh yeah, Singapore as well. Okay, sorry for forgetting about that. Robert Evans, hello to him. He says Bottas is gone. I hope not. I don't want it to be a case of he's at Mercedes for 2019, but he's already gone. I don't want it to be a case of that. I want it to be a case of that he actually has a chance to keep his seat for 2020, and I hope Toto Wolff has that mindset as well. Right, I'll try and look quickly for a final question or comment. Will F1 saying Vettel, apart from Baku and Singapore, was probably more impressive than Hamilton in 2017. Our advantage Hamilton had during the majority of the season. Hold on a minute. Apart from Baku and Singapore, yeah, but you can't not include those moments. They were so important to the championship. But yeah, excluding that, yeah, he was probably better because I don't think the Ferrari car was as good, but it was such those 2 moments were so important. You can't forget about them. But right, let me just the final comment or question in the chat is from Nature Suman, I think it is. He says, well, it's not a question, but it's a comment. He says Verline is a talent to be reckoned with, due to which Ferrari is looking at as a prospect to replace Kimi with Verline when Kimi retires from Sauber. I've not actually thought of that. Maybe as a replacement for Kimi Raikkonen. I don't think that will be the case. I still think it's unrealistic that Verline will be back in F1, which is sad because he does deserve to be in F1, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think, guys, that is now it for this video. And Nib, by the way, thank you for coming along this week. And thanks for the debate about Riva Bene and talking about the new drivers at their new teams.
Yeah, thanks for having me as per usual, except for last week, and that won't be happening again. That's for sure. But yeah, once again, thanks to everyone in the chat who participated in the podcast.
Yep, thanks to everyone in the chat as always, and again, thanks to Nib for being a part of this podcast. Now, I do need to get on to something important. So, tomorrow, this week in F1 is supposed to be happening, but it's probably not going to happen because I'm afraid there's not, at the moment, enough news stories to actually do an episode of This Week in F1. So, you'll hear from me tomorrow around midday UK time as to whether it's going to happen. But right now, as it stands, it's not going to happen. And my next video is probably going to be a recorded video about Max Verstappen coming out on the earlier part of next week. But what I want to say to you guys and kind of ask you guys is, I need 2 people for a video next week, which will be coming out closer to the weekend, say Thursday time. And I also need someone, I need, 2 people for that video, and also the same 2 people for the podcast on the Saturday. Basically, I'm doing a video about Lewis Hamilton, and what I want is 2 opposing point of views. I want someone who is pro Lewis Hamilton and someone who is against Lewis Hamilton. Or not against, but you know what I mean. Someone who's for and against. So what my idea is I want to do kind of like an interview of you 2 separate people, whoever you might be, interview you about certain things about Lewis Hamilton, and then pit the 2 of you, whoever you might be again, in a debate next week on the podcast. So you will appear in a video and also live on the podcast. If one of you can't make it, I will probably do the podcast as a recording instead of a live episode. So if you can't make it because it's that time of day you just can't make it, we'll adapt around that. But what I'm looking for, again, is someone who is for and against Lewis Hamilton. I want 2 opposing point of views. The rules are: 1, you have to be at least 18 years old to apply to be in that video and that podcast. And also, don't lie if you're not 18, because that's not going to help your case being on the channel really ever. So yeah, don't lie or anything like that. And also, yeah, make sure, if you can, that you are available for doing that video and the podcast. Again, if you can't make the podcast, the live episode, then we'll probably change it to a recording and then put it out at the same time, but just as a recording. So if you can't make it for the live one, then let me know. But if you are interested, either get involved on Twitter, follow me at Chaz6110, and hit me up on Twitter DMs if you're interested, or join my Discord server, which is in the description down below. Join the server and then hit me up in the private messaging on Discord, and we'll talk about it. And if you do want to do it, then I'll probably do a voice call or something like that. We'll talk about it and we'll get things arranged, because I'm hoping that this video can come out on Thursday. So I'm probably going to conduct the interviews around, I don't know, Monday or Tuesday, something like that. And then if we have to record the podcast, maybe we'll do it on a Wednesday or a Thursday. But hopefully, whoever those 2 people are, if you can make it live, then we'll do it live on Saturday. But if you can do that, and if you are interested, then follow me on Twitter at Chaz6110. I think there's a link down in the description, so you can go to that, or just look at the I think it says Chaz6110, so my username is right there. Or again, join the Discord server and hit me up in private messaging, and we will discuss it and arrange things. But also, if I can't find anyone out of you guys, my subscribers, who want to do that, then I'm probably going to have to look elsewhere, and probably to someone on Twitter who will be interested in doing so. But again, if you want to do that, those are the places where you can contact me, and we can talk about things and talk about the possibility of doing this, because I really want to do this, because I want to have 2 separate point of views. I don't want to have it just be one point of view. I want 2 separate point of views, so that you can get your opinions out there. That's what the channel is about. It's about opinions. So yeah, if you're interested, again, either Discord DMs or private messaging, or Twitter DMs, and we can talk about it and somehow arrange something there. But guys, that is it. Hold on a minute. Yeah, there you go. That is it for this podcast. Thank you guys for coming along. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We're going to be doing this every weekend, the podcast. Every weekend there is not an F1 race weekend, so don't forget to subscribe. Either bottom right of the screen, or click on my channel name and go to my channel page and hit the subscribe button and hit the notifications bell as well. Well, don't forget to like this video and comment down below what you thought of this video and what you thought of what we talked about. And also, if the volume is too low, put in the comments and I'll try to adjust things for the next time I do a video or a stream. So please let me know. But it sounds okay to me. Just I think you need to whack your volume a bit higher. But yeah, let me know about that. And again, let me know or comment down below what you thought of our opinions on Ricciardo, Leclerc, Gasly, Raikkonen, and all those drivers at their new teams in 2019. As well, don't forget to join my Discord server, link below in the description. And again, if you want to be involved in that video and that podcast episode, which will be next weekend, then hit me up on Discord. As well, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Chaz6110. Again, if you want to be involved in that video and podcast, hit me up in the DMs on Twitter. And check out my website, ChazzaHDF1 for more content like this. But guys, until next time, it has been me, ChazzaHD. Goodbye.